Hi, this is Art, and this is from my book, One More Hug. Obstacles are those dreadful things we see when we take our eyes off the goal. Henry Ford. Being in the military, and especially having served in Europe, was an experience like no other. I could tell you a million stories about Germany, but I'll tell you just one of them here. Upon my arrival in Germany, my first priority was to get my wife there as quickly as possible. D Battery was a lot different than the site I had come from in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Gaithersburg had been more like a job. You go to work, drink coffee, break for lunch, work some more, drink more coffee, and then go home. Except for an occasional stint on guard duty or KP, kitchen police, that was pretty much it. The site at Gaithersburg was a show site. That is to say that we all wore starched fatigues, we looked like soldiers, and we all had respect for one another. Not so at D Battery. When I arrived in Distelbach, I was transported to the fire control area on the back of a dust-covered truck. When the truck stopped and I jumped off, the first thing I saw was the first sergeant cutting grass. Where I had come from, in Gaithersburg, the first sergeant was revered. He didn't cut grass, he was God. In fact, in Gaithersburg, the first sergeant outranked God. If this first sergeant is cutting grass, I wondered, what are they going to have me doing? And I soon found out. Yeah, D Battery was a lot different. The duty in the launching area was 24 hours on duty, 24 hours off duty, and the off duty turned out to be a lot more on than off. Before I got a car, it would take me 2 or 3 hours to get home. Sometimes by the time I found a ride that was going close to my apartment and so on. Sometimes I wouldn't even get home until almost dinner time, just in time to spend a few evening hours with my wife before going to bed early so that I could get up at 4:30 in the next morning for my 24 hours on. Getting to work in the morning wasn't as difficult. Our apartment was on the main thoroughfare through town. I could wait across the street, and someone from D Battery would usually come along. I began catching a ride every morning with the supply sergeant. He seemed to come by every morning around the same time, and he was a pleasant enough fellow. We talked and got to know each other a little bit, and then one morning he said to me, "How would you like a 9-to-5 job working Monday through Friday?" I had only one question: when can I start? Sarge laughed, and he explained to me that the Army was about to adopt an inventory system that had been developed by Sears Roebuck and Company. He said that I could start on Monday, and that I'd be working in the supply room. It would be like having a regular job again. When Monday came, I couldn't wait to get started. It was like working in any other office. I took lunch breaks like a regular person. I went home at the end of the day like a regular person. It was great for the first week. The only problem was that there was no one there to train me. Sarge tried to help, but he didn't know how the system was supposed to work either. No one did. This new system was terrific, except that no one knew what it was. I read the official manual, but that wasn't much help. It wasn't like today. I couldn't look anything up on the internet or pick up a phone and call someone for help. My biggest problem was that I took the whole thing too seriously. If I hadn't tried so hard, I wouldn't have been nearly as frustrated. I started working through lunch hours and staying late. Instead of going home at 5 o'clock, I was going home at 7 or 8 every night. On top of that, Sarge started using me as a gopher. He would send me on these trips to Wiesbaden, about 2 hours away, to pick up supplies. That part wasn't as bad, but they gave me a 2.5-ton truck to drive there. The thing had 10 or 12 gears. It was huge. I had never driven a truck before. My training consisted of, here are the keys, have it back by 4:30. Trying to maneuver that thing through traffic, parking, backing up, it was a nightmare. Now, around this time, I was able to buy a used Volkswagen, and I started taking my own car and paying for the gas myself. The job was getting more and more frustrating, and I realized that I had bitten off more than I could chew. I started longing for the days when I was back in the launching area, cutting grass and pulling guard duty around the clock. The straw that broke the camel's back came late one afternoon. Sarge sent me to Wiesbaden to pick up supplies. This time, I wasn't going to the base in Wiesbaden. Instead, I was given the address of a private company and some vague directions to get there. I was told to take the truck because I'd be bringing back a lot of stuff, more than I'd be able to fit in my little Volkswagen. I drove around Wiesbaden in that monster truck with the 10 or 12 gears for almost 2.5 hours looking for the place. There was no phone I could use, no one I could ask for directions. I finally and reluctantly admitted to myself that I had had enough. I turned the truck around and headed back to Distelbach. After turning in the truck at the motor pool, I went back to the admin office, walked into the supply room and told Sarge I quit. I can't do this job. I had given it my best effort. I had put everything I had into it, and I had failed. I told him I wanted to go back to the launching area. After a half-hearted attempt to talk me out of it, he told me that I'd have to get permission from the battery commander before I could quit. I walked outside, found the battery commander walking back from the mess hall with a cup of coffee in his hand, and I approached him. "Sir," I said, as I raised my hand to my forehead in salute, "Sarge gave me permission to speak with you." I explained to the captain that I was unable to do the job, and I told him that I wanted to go back to the launching area. He said, "Well, which is it, Blum? You can't do the job or you want to go back to the launching area?" I humbly admitted that it was the former. The captain, a wise old man of 26, told me that the system I was working on had just been evaluated by battalion and that out of the 5 batteries, we were number 1. I said that no one had told me that. The captain was very nice about the whole thing and said that he was going to sign me up for an intensive 2-week course. He said, "I want you to go to the classes, and if you still think you can't do this, I'll grant your request to go back to the launching area." Within 2 or 3 weeks, the official orders came through, and I was off to Wiesbaden for 2 weeks of training. The trip was about 2 hours away, depending on traffic, and I decided to commute each day so that I could sleep at home. I actually enjoyed the classes and was finally beginning to understand how the system was supposed to work. I remember winning some kind of award in the class, the highest score on the final exam or something like that. The last class was on a Friday, and I reported back to D Battery on Saturday morning. I was immediately put on guard duty for the day. After all, they had been without me for 12 days. While in the guard shack, I was called on the phone and told that I had been signed up for another course. This one would be 3 weeks and was far more extensive than the first. The voice on the phone told me that I was to be in Oberammergau by 5 p.m. the next day. I said, "What's Oberammergau?" Oberammergau, as it turns out, is an enchanting little village in southern Germany, close to the Swiss and Austrian borders. I could take my wife with me if I was willing to pay my own expenses. So the next morning, we packed up the Volkswagen and headed south. The trip took all day, and we pulled into base just in time for me to report for duty at 5 p.m. We found a little guest house to stay in. I recall that it cost the equivalent of about $2 per day for a comfortable room. The community bathroom was down the hall. We lived there for the next 3 weeks. It was quite an adventure. Oberammergau was immensely beautiful, and I don't think either of us will ever forget our time there. The classes were intensive, much harder than the ones in Wiesbaden. One of the prerequisites for this course was that you had to have worked in supply for a minimum of 6 months. Heck, I hadn't even been there for 6 weeks. Nonetheless, I was able to muddle my way through the classes, and I did okay. Not great, but okay. When we left Oberammergau, I told my wife that I finally understood how the entire system worked, and I knew what I had to do to make a success of it. I was actually excited about the job for the first time since I had started. Upon my arrival back at D Battery the next morning, I was informed that my replacement had been found and that I was to immediately report to the lunching area. My request to go back there had been granted. I said, fine. I hope you like my vlogs, and if you do, leave me a comment at the bottom of the screen. It'll help me out, and it's free. And thanks for watching.